Welcome to the podcast that explores mysterious disappearances, bizarre worldly occurrences, strange phenomenon, and basically everything that's weird. Welcome to the podcast, everything that's weird. I'm your host, Anthony. I'm here with Brandon and our researcher, Mario. And tonight we're going to the city of brotherly love, the city that booed Santa Claus and apparently booed the space-time continuum. We're talking about the Philadelphia experiment tonight.
Yeah, that's not like the Philadelphia experiment where you like get the Philly cheesesteaks from the two places that are across the street from each other.
The comparison, the challenge.
I heard that both of those were shitty. Like,
so I heard that
the real ones,
Cheese Whiz, right?
Yeah.
Have you heard that?
In one. Yeah, it's Cheese Whiz on one, but on the other they use something else. So
prevalent, I think.
Yeah, something like that. And it's like that's the difference. And I had a buddy of mine that he's a huge Philly fan, and he's gone there before, and he was like, it's fucking Cheese Whiz, man.
Right.
And I was like, he's like, it's not good. And then like, but if you so you hear if you go like go around Philly, they got better ones. They're like much better.
So there is a place called Philly's West in LA, and it's a Philly bar, and they make cheesesteaks, and they make them two ways. They make one with Cheese Whiz and one with prevalent.
Yeah, I think that's the two. I think that's the difference between the two.
That's the Gold Star Skyline Challenge.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this story, it's a little bit.
Caveat of what the booing Santa Claus. Did you ever see the Bill Burr rant in Philly?
It's the best, dude.
It's the best. If you haven't seen it, go watch the Philly rant by Bill Burr.
13 minutes. He rips on the crowd.
They like booed his opening acts, and he got pissed. So he just went out there on like a 13-minute long rant about how shitty fucking Philly was.
I think at one point he said, "I hope you all get cancer."
Yeah. He's making fun of him, but he's like, you idolize a made-up fictional character.
Joe Frazier's from here, one of the greatest boxers of all time, and you build a statue to a fictional character.
It's fucking great. Anyway.
All right, so this is a little bit all over the place, but the timeline, because there's like the story, and then you kind of have to go back and do the timeline.
Yeah, it is kind of weird.
So the story is, and I'll come back to like the origins and everything, but here's just the basics of the story. The basics of the story is that the U.S. Eldridge was a destroyer ship that had just been commissioned, and
at the time it was like what we were like 2 years into joining World War
Sorry,
II.
I should have said that.
Yeah.
It's 1943. It's October 28th, 1943, and this newly commissioned ship, the USS Eldridge, was docked in Pennsylvania, and they were trying this cloaking technology. So I've heard two versions where there were actually two tests, and the second test was the one that was really fucked up. But what happened is they put these generators and wired the ship with this heavy duty copper cable. Mm-hmm. And the idea was, and I still don't know how to say, I guess it's gauzing?
Degaussing.
Degaussing? Okay. So the whole idea was to create an electromagnetic field.
To disrupt your own magnetic field.
And make you invisible to radar.
Correct. And mines.
So the first...
Which we were getting like devastated at the time. Right around that time, we were about 2 years in, and about that time was a lot of the U-boats were taking out a lot of destroyers because of radar. They were... a lot of mines too were taking out destroyers.
So they used they used Einstein's theory, his unified field theory, as kind of like the.
Am I wrong about this? Was that theory that wasn't published, right? That was like an unpublished work of Einstein.
At the time, it was not published.
Right.
I don't believe so. I think it, and he had some other theories that he hadn't worked out, and they think it was like a combination. So there's also, we'll kind of get into this in a minute, but also right before this, Nikola Tesla died, and his
penniless,
right, which is a shame.
Sad.
His whole like book of secrets, basically all of his life's work was cleaned out.
Yeah.
So he had kind of went into this a little bit also. But anyway, the crux of it was they wired this ship so that when they would power it up, this thing would be invisible to radar. And what happened on the first test, which is believed to have happened like a day or two before, it actually was transparent and they couldn't see it. A gas formed around it and it was transparent. And the sailors that were on the ship, one guy went through a deck and ended up on the bottom on a deck below where he was. And then the rest of the guys kind of got sick. And one guy, his hand was like fused to the bulkhead. And that was such a success that they did it again. And the second time, which was October 28th, they fire it up. And when they fire it up, this is like the story that everybody hears. Not only did it like get the gas around it, become transparent, but it actually teleported to Virginia.
Norfolk.
And, right. So it actually leaves Philadelphia, ends up in Virginia, and then
250 miles, I believe it was.
4 hours later, it's back in port, but this time it's real messed up. Like people are fused to the deck.
Other people went
disappeared.
mad.
Yeah, they went crazy. They disappeared. There's also like reports that there's like this is like an unsolved mysteries. Their thing on it, and actually it wasn't just unsolved mysteries. There's several other shows that talk about this. Some sailors from the Eldridge end up getting a fight at a bar, and they're like getting into it, right? like sailors do when they're at port. And
right.
They're like fading in and out, and it freaks everybody in the bar out. And there's sailors that just disappeared altogether. So this wasn't right off the bat. This wasn't something that was like like Roswell. It wasn't something that was reported on right away. In fact, it comes out like years later.
1955.
Right. So about 12 years later, from a guy named Carl Allen. He also has
pseudonym,
which is Allende, which I feel like you could do better than that.
Carlos Allende,
right? Or Carl Allen, right? Pretty close. Yeah. It's pretty close. So anyway, there is a guy that writes a book. And when the book comes out, it's a guy named Morris Jessup. It's kind of about UFOs and things that happen. And he uses his book to write.
His book was the case for the UFO, and what it was him just like he was actually he had a master's in astronomy. And he wrote the book as if aliens and UFOs existed, here's what I believe their propulsion system would be like. Here's how their engines and how it would fly
and races of aliens.
Right, and it would talk about all the different possibilities, and it became like super popular at the time.
So he sent this. Where I'm going to come back to this too, to the Office of Naval Research, and that's going to be important a little bit later. But in the margins, he basically writes all these notes, just like what you were saying. About
it's a book gets sent to the commander at the Office of Naval Research, mm-hmm. and his name's Admiral N. Firth, and it comes in a manila folder, manila envelope that says Happy Easter on it.
Right.
And it was sent by Alan, not Jessup.
Or Allende. But he kind of, so in these, one of the things he says is that there is, this goes back to what we were just talking about, that the Navy was, using some of these untested theories by Einstein, and that this scientist named Franklin Reno was like sort of in charge, and he was the one that kind of put this whole experiment together. It wasn't Einstein's experiment, although they did use his theories. Einstein didn't like head up the experiment. It was this guy, Reno. So he claims to be the only one alive at the time that witnessed it.
He was on like a merchant vessel or something.
Right. He was a merchant marine, and he was there supposedly at the time.
Yeah, because they did it like right in like broad daylight in front of other ships that could observe it.
So he claims later to have been interviewed by Einstein, and he was asked, how he felt, what was going on, like what his experience was, because he was the only like surviving witness of this Philadelphia experiment. But apparently it went horribly wrong, and supposedly they gave up on it. I don't know if they've ever given up on anything. I mean, that's where all our money goes, I think. Yeah.
I don't know any government program that's ever been shut down.
No, I mean, we talked about doing the people that could, like the seers. What is that?
What's that? Oh, the men who talk to goats.
Yeah, right. And we talked about doing I
feel like the government, once they get like money for something, there's like no reason for them to cancel it, because they're just going to keep getting that money and they just divert it to something else once they quit doing that. It's like, that's how it feels. Like nothing ever goes smaller. It's not like they go, we freed up all this money, don't worry about it, we're not going to raise your taxes because canceled all these programs.
It's the number one thing they talk about when they like budgeting. They say never say you needed less money, because you'll get less money. You always say you used everything and you needed more money. So that's kind of where it's at.
So that book, though, the book that Jessup wrote, the one that the admiral received, had annotations in pen all through it. That was the difference between the books. It had, somebody had handwritten what appeared to be 3 different people discussing the book itself, like as in like and they kept referencing the Philadelphia experiment in 43. They were like, they did this in 43, blah blah blah. They tried this invisibility cloak in 43, and it was written as in like 3 different color blue ink, and it was like three people were having a conversation and passing the book around to each other.
So it is important to say too that the naval commander actually gets a hold of Jessup.
Yeah, he invites him in, and
he's like, I've noticed that. I know that handwriting.
Yeah, I got 2 letters from that guy, I think. He's like, at least one of the people in that book, I think I have 2 letters from him. So he gets the 2 letters, and it turns out these 2 letters are written to him from Carl Allen, where the first one he wrote, and he put all the crazy thing he saw in the Philadelphia experiment to him. And so, from what I understand, he wrote back to him and asked him for scientific proof of what he was saying. And when he came back, and it was just kind of like still rambling about the events that took place and how people went mad. And he'd said a few other things. We'll get to it in the next section. But he kind of ignored it. He said, because when he came back and he didn't like really give him any proof of it, he just kind of forgot about it. And then that's when the admiral invited him in and showed him it, and he recognized the handwriting in it. Said, hey, I got 2 letters from that guy.
So that, by the way, the men at Stargate, that was Stargate, that was the name of the project that they were like trying to look into the future. And this one had a name too. This was I did see it.
So now correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it when the ship in Philadelphia went to Norfolk, when they turned the device on, you get a green mist, the ship disappears. It appeared in Norfolk, Virginia. Mm-hmm. But from what I heard was that it appeared in Norfolk, Virginia 10 minutes earlier than the time it left.
Okay.
And then when it returned to Philly, it returned 20 minutes later.
See, what in his account was that 4 hours had passed.
Yeah, but like there was like a time lapse of 10 minutes backwards from one, and then there's a 4-hour gap, and when it returns there's an extra 20 minutes on there.
Oh, okay.
Like you know what I mean? Like it was like, I don't know, and it's really weird, but that's what I heard happen. It was 10 minutes behind the time that it had been in Philly, and then when it got back, it had gained 20 minutes.
So it's important to say that, of course, the Navy never did say that this happened, right?
No, but they do know that in Philly they were doing the degaussing projects. The Navy did admit that, and
a lot of people say, well, the military never admits what they're doing when it comes to like experimental things, because I mean, all the time people get drugs, and we know that firsthand, that there's experimental drugs all the time. I know that I read a couple years ago that they have a pill they could give you that you don't have to sleep, and there's no side effects. It's probably Adderall. I was gonna guess. I mean, if I was gonna guess, Diet Coke, as they call it.
Now there was when they got. Did you know that when they that admiral, when he invited Jessup in, he also let him know, or I guess it wasn't the admiral, somebody else in the ranks. They let him know. They said that you might be pleased to know that we're going to make copies of this book, the one with the annotations in it, and it'll be distributed to the top ranking officers. Like, they were saying it like it was a big deal for him, and he was just like, that's fucking weird. Like, why are you telling me? And so they got this publishing company to do it that printed those copies that they needed. And that company was called the Varro Manufacturing Company of Garland, Texas. And so that edition because they mimicked the inked in handwritten annotations in the book too. Yeah, so there's that copy is known as the Varro edition. And they originally were only supposed to make like 12, but from what I heard is they up to like 127 of them were made, and some of them made it into civilian hands.
So where we did say that the Navy, they were done with, like, they didn't admit to this. It did fall under a project called Project Rainbow, and Project Rainbow sort of had to do with all this. So that's kind of where we're at. Let's get into some facts, because it does dance around a little bit with times and people. But what it is, the ship, the Eldridge, is in Philadelphia. It gets wired with some kind of theoretical electromagnetic field based on some theories from Einstein. It becomes transparent. It disappears. It shows up in Virginia. And when it comes back, some guys are like part of the ship. They're fused to it. It's a mess. People are sick. People disappear. And there's only one guy left. And it's this guy, Carl Allen, to tell the story. And it becomes folklore. It becomes the subject of a bunch of different movies, and now we're talking about it.
Yep.
All right. Let's get into some facts. Okay, so right off the bat, we should probably lead with this. Is this guy, Carl Allen? He's been known to pull a practical joke here and there. He's described as somebody that's likes to pull people's legs a lot. So like this is kind of right up his alley. And there's reports that he said that he did this to Jessup just to basically mess with him.
Yeah, he claims something else too, where he had actually went to the president of Varro Manufacturing and demanded that he give him his book back, and that he demanded a certain amount of money to make it all go away or whatever. And he wanted his book back, and that in fact he was all three authors in the handwritten parts.
So, okay.
But he claimed to do that in 1969, and according to their history, he retired from his position in 1967. The president of the publishing.
So also, according to the logs, if you believe the logs, the Eldridge wasn't even in Philadelphia.
No, it was in New York.
And a lot of people think it could have been another ship. What was the other ship? It was
I don't know.
I'm aboard it.
But yeah, I mean, in the essence of military secrecy, believing where a log says a boat was at a specific time during war doesn't sound reliable either. So,
okay, is it possible? So, before this, the Germans had their bell. And the bell technology was They didn't know what it was. It was they were able to make it anti-gravity, and if you ever look into the Bell technology, they actually found where this Bell thing worked, and it's very similar to what the Manhattan Project was. They built it for all. It looked like a bell, and nobody knows what's inside it or if it was manned or anything, because they only have like drawings or whatever. But they did find like the actual place. It's in Poland, and it had a conduit that ran around the whole thing and would have been filled with copper wires. And they basically ran out of time to develop it or study it or whatever. So at the time, something like that was.
I mean, they were only a couple years. They were only a couple years away from catapulting mentally challenged people at the United States.
Goddamn Russians! What is wrong with them? Somebody, communist or not, you should say no to that. You should be like, "Come on, guys, we can do better." As a people, I feel like we can do.
I want to be in a room where the guy's like, "That's your plan."
Hey guys, I got an idea. That's the Shane Gillis.
His buddy's grabbing his arm. Don't do it. You're going to get fired.
Shane Gillis has a whole thing about pitching the Special Olympics.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. He's like, those guys like two things: women's titties, and John Cena.
You ever heard John Cena's, his famous, like, you can't see me?
Yeah.
Thing. Have you ever heard him tell the story of that?
No.
Fucking funny as shit. It was like, there was like some video out at the time. And it was like, he was like dancing with his like hand in front of his face. And John Cena was like betting one of the other wrestlers, like, I'll walk out there like that. And he was like, you won't walk out there like that. And he was like, screw it, I will. But he said he's like all coordinated. So instead of like dancing, it looked like he was waving his hand in front of his face. And it stuck. He goes, and for whatever, how many years it's been, he's like, everybody comes up to me and goes, you can't see me. I've been looking at memes. And it was like totally unintentional.
So, okay. The ship.
Oh, by the way, too, John Cena is like the #1 Make-A-Wish guy. Yeah. He's done more Make-A-Wish than anybody else in history.
That's what Shane Gillis said.
Yeah, he's got almost as many as like everybody else combined.
He said, if you see John Cena, get the hell away from him, because oh shit.
Yeah. He does. He's done like something. It's crazy. His number is crazy. And when you do like the math on it, like how many he's Make-A-Wish deals he's done, and you do like the math on how long he's been doing it, it's like he'd have to do one almost a day every day. Like it's crazy how many he's done.
There's a funny, like, the movie's whatever, but there's a really funny scene with him. He's in a movie with Amy Schumer.
Yeah.
In the movie theater.
Yeah. Trainwreck.
Is that what it is? Trainwreck?
Mm-hmm.
I will enter you. The guy's like,
yeah. He's like, I think this guy wants to fuck you.
Yeah, man.
He's like, hey, Mark Wahlberg.
I'll fit Mark Wahlberg inside of me. It's like,
yeah, he's like, I look like Mark Wahlberg ate Mark Wahlberg. So that's great. That's a great scene.
That is a great scene. The ship is around. It is built during this time.
Yeah, it's a true ship. That the Eldridge does exist.
Einstein does have theories about this particular thing.
And the Navy was conducting experiments and doing degaussing, because degaussing is not something that you just do it and the ship's cool. You can go on your merry way. The Earth's magnetic field affects it, so it has to be done over and over again. It's like getting your oil changed.
So that goes into the other thing, which was the reason it worked one day and the next day it was like disastrous. It had to do something with the Earth's gravitational pull, and they barely touched it on it in an older video that I looked at, but it had to do with like the timing of the experiment and when it happened. It was absolutely the worst time for them to do the experiment based on the magnetic pull of the Earth.
Yeah.
And they didn't know that then.
Yeah.
So
there was like one of the things they did was also it was called wiping, where they drag these big lines off the ship, like the copper lines off the ship, and they'd pump like 2,000 amps through them, and it would eliminate the ship's magnetic field. It would make them appear invisible. So they did it like a couple different ways, and so those were real experiments that they were doing. They did degaussing and they did the wiping, which function in the same way, but just a different way to do it. And so they were conducting in Philadelphia. From what I understand, they were conducting experiments on trying to go invisible on radar.
So that goes back to stealth.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big part of the Cold War, was that the Russians really wanted stealth technology because they couldn't figure out how we were doing it. And it has to do a lot with refracting light. That's why they're black. They also don't have, I know that they have a bunch of different angles, so when something hits it, it makes it look smaller.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the ins and outs of stealth technology, but I have a feeling it has something to do with this, because I know that those things generate a ridiculous amount of power, and so much so that like everything on it expands and it leaks gas before they take off. It leaks fuel because when it heats up, everything expands and it's tight.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's cool and they fire everything up, and it leaks gas. So, or fuel, or aviation fuel, whatever kind of fuel it takes. So that technology was developed, and like a lot, big argument is people were saying, well, what, they just quit, they quit like looking into invisibility, but like, I don't know, maybe they just haven't perfected it, or maybe they don't understand it. When we did Bob Lazar, he was saying they don't really understand gravity. They understand some of it, but they don't understand like why we're on Earth and everything in your body, it holds together,
Well, it's not like our technology hasn't been mounted on something less advanced either. I mean, if you think about it this way, most of those like battleships and stuff, they're like gun systems were more capable than the boat was of handling them. So if like you were firing a bunch from the big guns on some of those boats, it buckled the hull. They would leak constantly. Like those guys were really good at like being able to do field patches on the boat where it would leak. They had metal panels they could screw onto the wall and stuff, because I remember my dad and another guy were talking, doing war stories. My dad being a Vietnam vet, so was this guy, and he was in the Navy, and my dad was Army, and he was talking about. So my dad's telling a funny story about one of his guys. He was, they got their platoon was on this mountain that was like super steep, and they were going to have to sleep there that night, and when it was clear that his guy was calling in artillery to a spot, and my dad comes up, he's like, "What the hell are you doing?" And he goes, "I'm making us a flat spot so we can sleep." and he's calling in artillery from an offshore ship.
Oh shit.
And so he's telling him about this. He did it once like that when he was clearing out a flat spot for him to sleep. He did it another time where he called in a strike, and he goes, "What the hell is it?" He goes, "I don't know. Probably monkeys. I think I got them though." and the guy from the Navy, he was flabbergasted because he's like, you know what would have happened if those guys on that boat found out that that's what he was doing?
Dude, right?
They were like, because they go into like scramble mode. He's talking about the whole procedure of them, and he goes, and plus if they were, and they're talking about the munition size, and he goes, well, if he's using that kind of round, those guns buckle the hull, and if you got to send this many, he was like, you can guarantee those guys were patching leaks.
Oh, sure.
So he was talking about it like, yeah, you can't just fire those guns off and not expect some repercussion from how powerful they are.
That's funny.
It's hilarious. But my dad's Vietnam stories were always, he only told us the funny ones. He didn't tell us the
so that was the
stuff,
same
really.
up until
not
the
until
end.
later on in life.
Right, that was the same with our dad. Like, he would tell us funny. It was all funny stories.
Mm-hmm.
So Carl Allen's a real guy. He's around, although he's not in Philadelphia at this time. Either is the ship, and that also. The thing with that is, maybe it could have been called the Philadelphia experiment and not been in Philadelphia at all, or he could have been mistaken, especially if he's the only witness.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a merchant marine. He's everywhere. This happens later. This is like part of his recall too. He says that. There is a connection between Philadelphia and Norfolk. You can get there.
Yeah, it's just we were talking about this before, because what were we talking about that was in that area? What was the show we were just doing where we were talking about where that waterway led to? That was
Two Back, right?
Yeah, where we were talking about was it a missing person?
Yeah, that
because we were talking about the river was pretty big river, and they couldn't find
that was Ray. That was Ray Gricard, the missing DA.
Yeah. So that all goes out into Chesapeake Bay. That's that same whole region. So yeah, you can go down the Chesapeake Bay to get to, but it's like as the crow flies, it's like 250 miles. So it's nothing a boat could do back and forth in 4 hours. So certainly not a vessel that size.
But I did, on one of the documentaries I heard from the 90s, that during that time we kept a lot of those eastern waterways secret from the Germans, even though like they had maps and stuff. We were using those. Whether we used it for that or not. One thing that I struggle with on this one is the fuse together. I don't really understand physics at that level. I mean, I barely understand physics anyway. Okay. So if everything's broken
that's
up,
that's like quantum physics too. That's
right.
Saying it makes my brain hurt.
If you break everything up into like particles, like Star Trek, right? Do you fuse with metal? Is that how that works? Like, I don't understand that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because we're all We're all molecules. Everything's molecules.
I guess, right? I guess that's the whole idea, is that's why they were fused together. I don't really know about that. And of course, nobody that was on the Eldridge corroborates the story at all, except for Carl Allen. It also could have been another ship. I don't know what the.
Have you ever heard the? Have you ever heard the comedian Pete Holmes?
Yes,
he does the.
I love Pete
that
Holmes.
Makes no fucking sense.
Yeah.
When he's talking about, he's like, you think you're on a planet? Zoom out.
Right. Yeah.
He's like, I'm made of molecules. This is made of molecules. Like, okay, I'll just accept that. He's like, but when we ask science why my hand doesn't pass through it, they're like, we don't know.
Yeah. It is true. There's a ton that we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of that's what this whole thing is. Like, do I put it past the government to wire up a battleship and see if they can make it invisible? Absolutely not. That actually sounds like us, right? I mean, that sounds like something we would do. But I don't know. Like, maybe over time, I don't know. Maybe over time, that's why all these things, came to be. Like, I finally found it. It's the USS Hammond is maybe what it was confused with.
Okay.
And so that was actually there in the 20th. That was there on the 20th in 1943 per logs. So, maybe he just got it wrong.
Yeah, maybe like. Maybe he knew the vessels and he saw it and it was new and he didn't realize they'd made one that looked just like the one he knew and he called it the one he knew,
Yeah. All right, well, let's see. I mean, we got anything else?
I don't know if there was anything else. I know that I know we didn't really mention this, that in the scrollings, the annotations in that Vero edition of the case for a UFO, they do talk about one of the writers. There's it's believed that there's 3 writers, and one of the writers appears to maybe be an alien because they describe the government getting close to their technology, and that they describe like 2 other races of alien.
Okay.
In the annotations in the book, it talks about two different races of alien.
And they think it was written by an alien?
They think that it was a conversation that was Carl Allen, somebody else named Gemma, or Jemmy, and
Gemma.
a third person that appeared maybe to be extraterrestrial because of like I said, it was saying things like they're getting close to our technology and this can't be done. We have to stop it or something like that. So, well, whatever it was enough to prick the ears of the ONR.
I know what I wanted to say. So this was naval research, and Bob Lazar was paid by naval intelligence, and they worked with propulsion, and they worked on like back engineering UFOs. And then, like, just coincidentally, so I watch a lot of YouTube. I don't watch a lot of TV, but I'm into abandoned stuff. I think I've told you that before. But, like, I was just watching one. It was an abandoned Coast Guard base in the Mojave Desert. So why? And I said that. And my daughter even was like, why is there Coast Guard in the desert? I'm like, that's like really good question. Like, why is it in the desert? And it's out, it's not by Area 51, but it's, within striking, like a car ride.
Mm-hmm.
And it's out in the middle of nowhere. And now it's part of like that, land management.
Yeah.
And it was just like this base, not very big. It had like a couple monitoring areas. I'd say it was the size of like a big fire station. That's what it looked like. But it's the Coast Guard in the middle of the desert. Like, what? Why? And then you got naval intelligence handling stuff at like Area 51.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I don't know, this is like Navy research.
Yeah, but, a lot of areas out there that if they had like lakes or water and stuff that was like redirected to Nevada or California, shit like that. There's a lot of lakes that went away.
Okay, so there you go. That's possible. Yeah, well, Groom Lake is a dry lake bed.
Yeah. So, like, what's the one that's out there in Nevada they said it's going low?
Oh, that's like California, the Salton Sea.
It's like was it Havasu?
Oh, Lake Mead.
Lake Mead?
Yeah.
Okay. I knew one of them was dropping.
I think it's back though.
Yeah, because it got really low, and then they were like, "Hey, what's going on?"
Finding bodies and stuff from like 1960 Vegas.
Fucking Jimmy Hoffa.
Yeah. But yeah, like, so the Salton Sea was kind of like that. They're actually where Bob Lazar used to race his jet car. That's the Salt Flats.
Yeah.
And they're just like, they were like, basically, over time, the oceans get trapped inland and they just dried out,
Mm-hmm.
And the Salton Sea was actually freshwater, but it was an old sea. So it was like a salt basin. And then freshwater flowed into it. And then it was like a saltwater lake. And it was huge. And then they redirected the water. And now it's like you can get land there for like nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, like, Elon Musk is trying to buy land there because I think there's like metals. There's metals there. But hey,
I saw an ad for land out there, and they were like, and it threw me off at first because they were like, this land's completely surrounded by BLM property. And I was like, what the hell does Black Lives Matter buying up property in the desert for? I was like, oh, yeah. You're a moron. You're a land management fucking idiot.
That's something I never even knew existed. Are they part of the Interior? The Department of the Interior?
I don't know. Had to get Mario on that one.
Yeah. I had no idea about the Bureau of Land Management. It's actually pretty crazy. So they're actually super asshole about taking land, but on the flip side, you can use Bureau of Management land.
Yeah.
So you can go mine,
lease it, lease it, and all that stuff.
You can get a stake of claim.
Yeah.
On Bureau of Management land, you can get a stake of claim, set up shop, and mine it.
Yeah.
You can let your cows graze on it. There's a lot of stuff you can do. Mario's saying yes, it is part of the Interior.
Yeah.
All right. So you want to get into what we think?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Well, you want to go first?
I can.
Go ahead.
I think it's all garbage.
Yeah.
I think it's all bullshit. I think it was like a story that I think it just feels like this guy was just fucking around. He was fucking with people, and the fact that the Navy like made copies of it and passed it around through a publisher, like through a printing company,
like disinformation.
It was kind of like, I think it was like a funny to them. They were like, look at some of the notes in here, and that's funny. And like maybe he got close on some stuff, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, look how close he got on some of this shit, you know what I mean? And knowing it's bullshit, but they had to do their due diligence, so they call in Jessup and they do an interview with him, and they're just doing their due diligence. Like, do these guys know anything? No, this fucking dude's crazy, and he's like a fanboy of the guy's book, and because you gotta understand, at the time when Jessup wrote this book, it did get really popular, and all the like UFO people were coming out of the woodwork for it, and they like, you know, they love this book, so they were sending Jessup. This isn't that letter that he got from Allen wasn't the only. I mean, he got tons of stuff. People were sending him photographs of UFOs and telling their stories and abduction stories and UFO stories. He was getting all kinds of stuff like that at the time, and he got that postcard from Allen. And it wasn't until he went in and they showed him that book that he was like, I recognize that, because he thought it was weird how he like did some of his punctuation and shit, and his capitalization. It was like done weird, and he recognized that when he saw that book. He's like, I got these letters from him, you know, and they were just kind of like these random, because even in one of the two notes he sent to him, he said that two of the officers, two of the sailors on the boat burst into flames and burned for 18 minutes. What the fuck, man?
He's a master leg puller.
Like 18 minutes? They burned for 18 minutes? Like, you know how long?
That deal.
It's like they're just burning. And I don't know. It's like, it's so out there. And then there's all the messed up timelines and the things that don't work out. Like, because even this Carl Allen tells the story of going and demanding his book from Vero Manufacturers president. And his claim was, he did claim that he went there in 1969, and the president of the publisher, or of the printing place, had retired in 1967. So it didn't even make sense that he said that. And there was, you know, the fact that the boats logged in New York, and neither Virginia or Pennsylvania. There was another ship, but they don't hide the name. You know, it's right on the fucking ship. Mm-hmm. So if you're observing a ship, the reason you call it that. Now, I gave him the benefit of the doubt, saying maybe he knew that other ship, so he just called it that. But let's be honest, it's pretty obvious when you see a military boat what the fuck the name's. You know, it's right there up on the front. We put USS, whatever its name is, right there up in the front of the boat. So for him to see this event and not be able to recognize the name on the side of the boat seems unlikely. That it would be the other boat instead. So the fact that it wasn't there, you know, is weird. And the fact that it's like a creepy green gas that fogs up all around it when it disappears. It just sounds like if you're going to be in the 1940s making up a sci-fi thing. You know what I mean? That was probably like the prelude to a Scooby-Doo episode.
I would have gotten away with it.
So it just sounded like, and you got sailors that were part of this experiment that bad shit happened to them, and nobody was like, there's no hospital records or
none of them get a pension.
There's no people crying like, and suing the government for their husband being fused to a fucking boat. There, you know what I mean? There's just nothing there that backs up all these crazy stories that you would see if it was like happening, because some of these people that were on the boat supposedly went out into the public for years afterwards, and bad stuff happened, like you were talking about in the bar where they were like fading in and out. Mm-hmm. There was also, Carl Allen wrote in his like second letter that men were just like passing through walls and in front of their family members and shit like that. It was just like really weird ramblings. So that's why Morris Jessup dismissed it anyway, because he was like, do you have any proof of this? And when he came back with just more ramblings, he was like, I'm not going to even pay attention to this guy. And he only even took it serious when they called him in. Now, I would have said this was to hype up his book, because there is this truth too. Jessup wrote that book and it was a big hit. So he tried to write another one, and it wasn't great. And then he did a third one, and it was even worse, and his publisher dropped it.
He ended up killing himself, right?
Yeah. So that's the thing too. Now that you'll hear the conspiracies that he was offed, you know what I mean? But he like did the whole, because he was like, he called up a friend of his and said he had really exciting breakthrough on his research, because according to the conspiracy theorists, that Jessup kind of picked up the mantle of looking into this whole Philadelphia experiment because of all these stuff that happened. Mm-hmm. And so he started doing all this research, and he called a friend and said he was really excited about it. And the next thing you know, he's Epstein. But it's
like Kingpin when you got Munson.
I think, yeah, because I think, and this was a different time when you failed publicly like that. It was a bigger sting than it is now. People don't worry about that. The social image isn't as strong nowadays. People nowadays are like, fuck it if you don't like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
More than back then, it was like you didn't. If you got pregnant out of wedlock,
you had like one. You had like one shot at image back then. Whereas
and I think that's what burned. Like he did this book, and then he tried to write another one, and it just failed, and another one failed, and then they cut him off from his. The publisher dropped him. You know what I mean? And he probably looked like a fool to himself. He probably felt like he looked like a fool to everybody, and he fucking offed himself, because he was found in the car with they had a pipe went from his exhaust into the car, and he wasn't like restrained or anything. Now, they didn't perform an autopsy, so you don't know, but there was like rags stuffed in the window, like from the inside. You know what I mean? Like somebody packed the window from the inside with rags, and so that no air could get out. So I don't know. It'd be pretty kind of hard to, from what I understand, it would have been hard to pull that off, to look like a suicide. Like it would have looked a little fishier than. It looked kind of obvious that he killed himself, from what I understand.
All right.
It was done from the inside. I just don't see. There's so many indiscretions. There's so many little things wrong with this story, like all over times, dates, where people were at, proof that those people were there. And when it boils all down to it, it's all the word of one prankster. Slightly crazy prankster at that.
So it didn't happen.
To me, it didn't happen at all.
Okay. All right. So I agree with you, but I have a lot of problems. I think the Navy, and you said they did it like, hey, look how stupid this guy is. Okay. That's one way to look at it. That is one way to look at it. I think probably what happened was they did do the experiment. Nobody was on board.
Yeah.
They did have some kind of effect. Whether that was it got teleported, which I find that hard to believe.
Or a bunch of whales beach themselves.
Something happened. Like I do believe that they probably came up with some kind of breakthrough, but being able to harness it is another thing. Mm-hmm. This guy, I don't think he saw it. Mm-hmm. I think he probably heard about it.
Yeah, because they were running those experiments.
This was like Tesla had a death ray. The Germans had the bell. We were after. I mean, like we're working.
Did you ever see the show Eureka?
No.
It's a great show. You got to go back and watch that show if you haven't seen it.
I know of it.
There's like a whole town where they made this town so that all the most brilliant minds in the world. These are all like all the people that are like descendants of like Einstein and Newton and all that shit. And like they made a town where they all live together so they can invent and conduct these experiments in peace, right? Well, there's like a ranger that, or maybe he's FBI, I can't remember what he starts out as. He happens upon the town, mm-hmm. and with his daughter, and then like he ends up being their sheriff.
Yeah.
And they were doing this thing where they had this, and it was a death ray, right?
Yeah.
So, and he's like, and like somebody invented it, and they kept calling it like by its scientific name. They're like the matter fucking accelerator, accelerator. And he goes, "It's a death ray," and they were like, "Well, no, I mean it's a blah 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 blah." And they kept doing it the whole show. He goes, "Why won't you people just say death ray? It's a freaking death ray." Because he's like the dumb one comparatively. Right. You know what I mean? Right. He's like they're all these geniuses, but he's like super wise, figures everything out. But it's funny. Why won't you people just say death ray?
But I mean, Tesla is working on the death ray in like 41.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's like that to me. That's
wasn't
like
the pervasive thought back then. Like the idea of peace would be to create the most powerful weapon in the world. That everybody would have to remain calm underneath your.
So that was like the.
That's actually what that episode I was talking about in Eureka was about. They described that as like I think it was like an Einstein thing too, where they were saying like the guy that creates the most powerful weapon
controls peace.
Yeah, controls peace.
So like that sort of is what's happening with nuclear technology.
Yeah.
Although we still have skirmishes and stuff, and but there's no world wars. Although you might argue, like right now, it's not looking great. But like you know, we haven't had like it's mostly like conflicts and like political. It's not like that guy has to go.
It's a lot of propaganda too.
Right. Like it's like the days of like you know that whole country needs to be wiped off the map is kind of over.
There's a lot of countries that conflict and start wars just so they can propaganda. Mm-hmm. That's like their goal. It's like so they can feed misinformation to their people.
So I think this Allen guy probably knew somebody that was close to the experiment. He told him about it. It ended up with this, you know, author who may have hit a nerve. And, you know, it takes a lot of effort to like annotate a book like that. Like that's a lot of pulling your leg, You know,
Yeah.
So he must have had some kind of insight to it. He probably embellished.
Mm-hmm. Well, he had from 43 to 55.
I mean, if you think about it, think about what you're saying. Like, you're like, hey, you know, the military they have like the capability to make a ship disappear. You'd be like, really? No way. Hey, what do you want for lunch? You know what I mean? Like, you'd be like, yeah, of course they do. They should. They're the fucking military. They better have a way.
It's like the UFO things. They're like, hey guys, there's real UFOs. We were like, yeah, that's cool.
And like
vaccinated?
Exactly. Like Bob Lazar, he has been saying his story since 1989. Like, I knew, like, when like being online and all that shit was like a thing. It was like the late 90s where everybody's online. You know,
yeah.
He's telling his story the same as he's telling it now. Yeah. And now people are like, yeah, man, I mean, that's fucking sounds right. Because the government
discovered the element he talked about. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, and the government's like, you know, we have these things. They've crashed. We're testing them. We don't know exactly what they are, where they come from. Yeah, you got guy from Blink 182 saying there's a pyramid in Alaska. There's, like aliens or robots, because real people and real aliens can't fly that far, except for some of them that are here. You're like, what? And, you know what I mean? All of a sudden, what was ridiculous?
Unless you can believe that you can fold space.
Right. Well, what was ridiculous is like reality. And now, and you know, that's kind of what I think this thing is like, it started off with like, they probably had some kind of breakthrough, and they probably, I don't know, whether it was called the Philadelphia experiment or somebody, and I never could find the origin of how it was named.
Yeah.
Did you? I never did. That was really what I was trying to find
I think
out.
Carl Allen named it.
Okay, so, you know, if he's mistaken about where he was or what happened, or, you know, if the person told him.
I think it was his annotations in that book that just kept repeating the experiment in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia experiment in 43.
And, you know, maybe he was told that.
Mm-hmm.
But this sounds totally plausible as something that the government and the military would do, is try, with technology that we have, which is electric, try a massive field of electric and see, well, you know, what we could do. Because even at the time, we didn't really understand electric. Like Tesla's, a lot of his work, he talked about pulling electric out of the air for free.
He did it.
Right. So, but when you talk about doing that, it fucks up radio frequencies. There's
a kid on the TikTok his name is dang it, now I'm gonna get it wrong. Dr. Abraham, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
He's a young kid, and he just like junkyard stuff builds these crazy shit. He built a Tesla coil. He built like one of those big his big power station to give free electric, and he was powering shit across his yard and shit. It's nuts.
Yeah, it's crazy. Because I think it was on Rogan where he was talking to Bob Lazar, and he said, you know, like, what, like if Tesla, we could develop the getting free electric from everywhere, would that help? And he's like, probably not. He's like, because it would mess up all of our communications, and he's like, you would have static from all this directed, you know, atmospheric electricity that you're pulling in. So I don't know, like, this sounds to me like a real experiment. The people that got fused to the deck, the people that vanished, the green fog, all of that sounds like Scooby-Doo.
It does.
But like, whether or not it even disappeared, I'm gonna go so far as to say maybe it didn't disappear. Maybe something as simple as when they fired it up, they had a clock on the dock and a clock in the boat, and it threw the clock back 5 minutes.
Yeah, it did something weird. Yeah,
that is a huge, huge, huge jump in technology. You did something, and then you need to fall back and regroup, do some data research, figure it out, and then you're not doing that again in public. You know,
right?
You would do that in some research lab in the middle of the desert.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it happened, but I don't think it happened the way Carl Allen said it happened. I think probably more realistic is that it probably didn't happen in Philadelphia. He either got the information secondhand or he was mistaken, and he made up the rest so that people would pay attention.
Yeah, I mean, I can feel you on that. They were doing something. There was definitely something going on there. They were like running some experiment. It could have been top secret, and he caught wind of it. I can buy that because like I said, we know that they were doing those tests and trying to hide the cloak themselves. The Navy was actively trying to cloak their ships from German U-boats. So, and it was a constant race. Like anybody that does any World War II, research at all, you find out that there was like a technology race going on.
100%. And definitely for me, the naval research was like, oh, that's got to be naval intelligence, right? Like I don't know what naval research became. Yeah. But like if Bob Lazar was paid by naval intelligence at Area 51, and I'm watching the thing with my daughter, and she's like, "Why is the Coast Guard in the desert?" Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, there's got to be something.
That was the second experiment,
right? Maybe
they're like, "Shit, where'd it land?" I don't know.
So a long time ago, I remember seeing the Weekly World News. I don't know if you remember that paper at the grocery store, but it said they're not dealing with aliens at Area 51. They're dealing with time travel. They're trying to perfect time travel. Mm-hmm. And dude, like if you think about even just the theories and making that possible, you're talking hundreds of years to make that of research and development to make that possible.
Yeah, and like you were talking about Elon Musk, and like one of his sentiments was that to advance technology, you need to get everybody out of poverty.
Agreed.
And it's something that I've spoke about before, where I've said that our technology often surpasses our humanity, and it's one of those things where he was saying what he's getting at is that we have this resources, intellectual resource, and there are people out there that could be an intellectual resource, but you can't tap into them because their concern over staying alive supersedes their ability to innovate.
You know why people don't make it in Hollywood? This is 100% true, and I don't give a fuck. Yeah, you have super talented people that are poor, and you hear the stories. I slept in my car and all that shit. Yeah. It's just not true, dude. It's not. Some people are like crazy gifted, and you look like Brad Pitt. Okay, you go out there and make it. Okay, but the truth is, people that have to work to live out there. Yeah, you can't take acting classes. You don't have time to go to like all the mixers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can't hang out in Beverly Hills all day.
Get your name out. Yeah.
You can't do that. That in and of itself is a full-time job. Mm-hmm. So like when people move there to make it big, you see it all the time. You know, it's a joke to people that live there. They're like, "Oh, you're here to be an actor, huh?" Yeah. Because they know. They're like, you're not bigger than this town. You may have been awesome where you're from, but like you're not bigger than LA. And it's true. And some people do make it. But the truth is, it's a very small percentage. And when they get there, the biggest problem is what you just said. You have to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're focused on, paying the rent, how are you gonna like, work on your craft?
Yeah, and it's worse than that. I mean, like, I saw some crazy stats the other day. It was like they were talking about, because we spent a lot of time in this country talking about the 1%ers, and but they were like, do you know what a 1%er in the world looks like?
Crazy, right?
And it's like 35 grand and up.
It's like if you
make $35,000 and up, you're in the 1% of the fucking world.
I've read this. If you have a phone, running water, air conditioning and heat, and a closed system house, meaning you don't live in like a shanty.
Yeah, you can close and lock your doors and windows.
You are not even a car. You are in the top 1% of the world.
Yeah.
And you think about all those people, like I read a thing about a kid that he used spare parts, and I believe it was in India, and he built a whole cellular network and used donated cell phones to give to everybody in his little town.
Yeah.
And they all have free cell service.
Yeah. There was a kid in Africa that built a whole irrigation system for his village. And it was from like scrap parts. And he wasn't even, you had to pay to go to school. So he couldn't even go to school. And he had to he would sneak in the library at night and read books and taught himself all this shit about how to wire stuff up. And he got a generator. His teacher had they made a movie about him. His teacher had a generator that went on his real simple generator that was for his headlight on his bicycle, and it had a wheel that went on to that touched the front wheel. So when he was pedaling, it would spin the wheel, turn the generator, and power the headlight. And he used that to make a windmill that would pump water and irrigate their crops. He made a whole irrigation system for him. So, and he was 12.
And there's a lot of truth to that. Like when you have to worry about paying bills and you can't just focus on
it's not even like that for some people. Some people, it's just every day. It's you have to survive. If you don't figure it out, if you don't sell your goods, if you don't hunt your food, your family could die. So you don't have time to sit and tinker.
And Bob Lazar said this too. He's like, what makes you mad? He's like, is that we have some kind of technology like this? He's like, literally the whole world, the way it works, would be over. There would be no need for 90% of the jobs.
Mm-hmm.
If you could ship something there, you get communication there, you can just get stuff back and forth. You don't need trucks, you don't need trains, you don't need planes, there's a whole lot of stuff that's being suppressed. It's just in the name of economic progress, which, dude, listen, I love to make money. I'm the first one to say go make money. But at the same time, like you said, are we really using everybody, to their full potential? And that's kind of what I think about this. Is they made some kind of gain, whatever that was, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's what I think. Those annotations in the book would make them kind of giggle, you know what I mean? If they was if he was writing something that kind of got close, or maybe it was something they joked about while they were doing it, and they were kind of passing it around the room, because there was a story about one of the books getting sent to somebody, and he left him a note that said, "You'll enjoy the annotations. Like, I think you'll enjoy the annotations more than most." So it was like one of those things where they were kind of swapping the, and it makes me think of this. This is why I think this is. There was a show called The Good Place. Did you ever see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Mario. Have you watched them all?
I didn't watch them all, but I've definitely.
Okay, but you all saw where he introduces the guy up on the wall, the picture of the guy on the wall that got like 99% of it right. They're like, she was like, because she's asking, she's like, did any of the religions get it right? And it was like this one guy that he got a picture of him on the wall, just some dude. He was like one night in like a acid mushroom filled rant. He got like 99% of it right. They're like, that guy's a legend.
That's funny.
And it was just like a wild guess one night when the dude was just ranting on drugs. You know what I mean?
That's funny.
So it was like one of those things where I think that's kind of like similar to what happened. You know, the guy was kind of like rambling and he got a couple things right, and they were like, "This is hilarious that this guy got." You know what I mean? I think that's kind of how that worked out. That's
okay,
why that
I'll give you that. I'll give you that. That actually makes sense.
So, you know, and like you were saying, they were doing experiments, and it was like funny because maybe it was like, yeah, that's actually what we were trying to do. We didn't do it, but that's hilarious that that's exactly what we were trying to do. And they might even been like, yeah, there actually is two races of aliens that we know about. You know what I mean? It could have been any of those things because shit, Roswell was right around the corner.
I was waiting for Mario for this. I thought I knew this. Einstein dropped out of high school, so he ended up getting a college degree. But I thought he had help from his mom, but he was like self-taught. Like he was a pioneer in his field. So like, but then he ended up getting a bachelor's and a PhD. But like, you'll find this like, especially with technology, you'll have like a Zuckerberg that you can't get taught anything. Like,
yeah, it was just like the thing that you're saying about Bob Lazar, like where he was like,
right.
You know, they couldn't find his credentials. It's like, well, he didn't actually need them. He just got it.
Yeah, and even
He's a
the
good
haters,
hunting.
Even the haters, well, like you watch Rick and Morty.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, school's for dummy Mortys. Yeah. But like, even like, yeah, like Neil deGrasse Tyson tried to like, you know, say Bob Lazar doesn't know what he's talking about and all this shit, but like, he couldn't explain gravity. You know, when it came down to it, like, is he a hater because Neil deGrasse Tyson's not at, you know, Area 51? Right. It kind of makes it look like he is, you know?
Yeah. I think he's like that a lot. I think that dude gets jealous of people a lot.
Yeah, because he's super smart.
He fell
like
in love with his celebrity, and he doesn't like anybody treading on it.
Sure, he's like a Sheldon, like where he's like super smart, and nobody's as smart as him. And when you are, you know, you're wrong. You know, you gotta be. So I do think it happened. I think it happened. I just don't think it happened the way this guy said, and maybe he was even the reason the story was embellished. But I think it hit a nerve. Yeah. And that's the reason there's been so many movies and stories, and why we're still talking about it, you know, 70 years later.
Yeah, same thing. I believe that there was something to it.
80 years later.
And I think it was just like I was saying, like that episode of that show where it's like he kind of got some stuff right. They think it's funny. They pass it around. But other than that, it was that guy making shit up and embellishing shit.
Sure.
He just kind of like you said, he struck a nerve, or he hit something that was close to home, and it resonated. So, but I don't think any of it fucking happened.
No, you don't think any of it. So we're just maybe then.
I'm like,
we're divided.
I don't think that event happened. I should say. I think the government's definitely probably was trying some technology experiments that I don't think any of them made a ship vanish or like a vanish. I mean, radar vanish, one thing. Completely vanish from physical sight is another thing. Transporting to another place is completely different than time travel. You're throwing off.
Like I said, I think it could have been something as simple as like a difference in time, or
it
like
might have just been like
second.
the magnetism pulled the fucking minute hand back 5 minutes, and they were like, "Was that 5 minutes? Did we lose, or was it, or was that just a magnetized hand going backwards or something?" You know,
absolutely, it killed fish. Who knows?
Something, beached a bunch of whales.
Who knows? Who knows? But something, it hit some kind of nerve. I do think they tried it, whether it was on the Philadelphia, on the Eldridge, or another ship. But I think it did happen.
Chinese, they try shit all the time. They do crazy stuff all the time, and damn the consequences. Russia did that for a long time too.
And you know what? Roswell wasn't the first UFO.
It's like the Chinese blowing up their own satellites just to show that they could prove to themselves that they could hit a target in space, and all they did was like hurl debris around the planet.
Have you seen Space
Makes it
Force?
dangerous for anybody that's out in space because they cause so much of a debris field.
Have you seen Space Force?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
When they're on the moon and the Chinese are already there.
Yeah.
Like, who the fuck is that? It's the Chinese. It's like, oh my god. And they like wreck their moon base.
Yeah. Chinese, they're like that, man. They're intellectual thieves. They're
They did come up with some good stuff.
The Chinese government, don't get me wrong. I'm just talking about the Chinese government. We're going for full cancellation here.
We are. You want to say anything about trans people while we're at it?
Right.
All right, so we're divided, right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess. I don't know if I'm
possible.
I think it's impossible. It's improbable what Carl Allen
I
decides.
agree with you there, but that there may have been an experiment that tried this.
Something similar to it.
Yeah.
Okay. Like they try to do an experiment to make themselves invisible to radar, and something bad happened,
or something good happened.
Didn't work out, or something good happened, and they hit the rest of the technology. But either way, Carl Allen's full of shit.
He's a master leg puller.
Old Carlos, fucking
Allende.
Fucking.
It's the worst
all he did
code
was,
name ever.
He just add a DE at the end of his. He just added a DE at the end of his name.
And made him Carlos.
Carlos instead of Carl.
He could never be in the CIA. All right. Well, I'm Anthony.
I'm Brandon.
I'm Mario.
And this is Everything That's Weird. For show notes and merchandise, go to www.everythingthat'sweird.com. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. And be sure to like, subscribe, and review anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to contribute, please go to our Patreon page at Everything That's Weird. Check us out on Instagram at Everything That's Weird, or Twitter at ETWPod. Or if you'd like to send us an old-fashioned email, go to everythingthat'sweird@gmail.com.